Praise the sun. All right, everybody. How's it going? Um, so it's been another week, and I got started on implementing some of the in-game stuff this week, but can't really talk about that yet. But I will say it's been a very interesting technical challenge in addition to the design challenge to implement this mechanic, and it would be really fun to talk about the technical stuff that I had to do this week, but we got to keep all that under wraps for now. But the thing that I did do this week that I can talk about is I got significantly started on. There's bugs swarming around me out here. Anyway, hot summer day. So I got significantly started on the gallery area, the art for that. So I had to do that design work, concept art last week, but now I've started detailing out that area in terms of the pixel art. So some of that's more or less done, but I'd rank it probably at like the actual art is probably like 10% done, but the planning is probably 90% done. I might have to change some small things here or there. But that's pretty much what I did this week. I think I said I wanted to talk about something topic of the week this week, so I haven't planned that out as much as I kind of wanted to, but I guess I can talk a little bit about it. So I've pretty recently been playing Heavy Rain because, like, the David Cage trilogy or whatever the heck you want to call it, games came out on Steam this past week, maybe the week before last. So I've been playing Heavy Rain, and I've always had some kind of thoughts, I guess, about story in games, and particularly the attempt at like dynamic, interactive storytelling in games. And David Cage kind of is a big example of that type of thing. And I've only really played the first David Cage game. I shouldn't really just put David Cage's name on it, but the first Quantic Dream game I played, Fahrenheit or Indigo Prophecy or Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy or whatever the heck you want to call it. So my general thoughts on like interactive storytelling in games is that the choice, like story choices, are like a really overrated thing for gamers. This kind of could be considered alongside my innovation is overrated video as like a X is overrated series. But I do think story choices are overrated, and the main reason that they're overrated is if you think of like the best and your favorite stories, even in video games, basically none of them have really much of any meaningful interactivity to the story. I will say that one of my favorite story games, Night in the Woods, does have some story interactivity, but it's more about like... So the game kind of has this cycle where you go through day after day, and each day you can decide, oh, I'm going to hang out with this friend, or oh, I'm going to hang out with this other friend. And depending on which friend you hang out with, I believe you kind of end up excluding certain content from your playthrough of the game. Now, I may be wrong. It may be that you go through all the same content no matter what, but I think at least some amount of it has to get excluded. And that's okay, because that's kind of just the structure of the game, is that you're just kind of hanging out and then things happen as you're doing that. It's not so much of a real plotted game like Heavy Rain, for instance, which is like a murder mystery. And it's kind of like, how are you going to make meaningful changes to that story and still have a story that's coherent? I don't know. Maybe I'll report back when I finish Heavy Rain. But generally speaking, in most games, the choices that you make in the story will boil down to kind of two types of things. There'll either be a choice that is more or less inconsequential no matter how you do it. So it's like, do I look in the left drawer? Do I look in the right drawer? Which one do I look in first? It doesn't make much difference. Or there'll be a choice that seems consequential, but ultimately gets funneled in. So it kind of temporarily branches the story and then funnels it back in. And the reason for this is because to tell a story, you kind of have to have authorial control over what the characters are doing and who's involved in the story and all that, or else the story is just nonsense. Now, I certainly think there could be something interesting to be done with a fully generative storytelling system. But as somebody who's like played a fair amount of Dungeons and Dragons,
A few more hours and you would have been beyond our aid. But you have some strength in you.
which is a game in which you can kind of do whatever you want, and you've got an intelligent, game designer there who can react to what you're doing. This is the type of thing that actually seems fun for the first half dozen or so games that you play, but then you realize that most of the choices that you make are like, oh, I'm going to kill this guy. And then that just leads to, oh, well, now I'm in prison. And it's not a very interesting story, right? So it ends up being the case at a certain point that you go into more of a collaborative storytelling mode, where rather than just doing whatever you feel like, you're actually just trying to help the dungeon master tell their story better, right? You're trying to embellish upon what they're doing. This is the whole improv comedy rule of like yes and. So D&D is not very fun unless you're yes anding the dungeon master. And there's very little you can do in the range of yes and so it ends up being less interactive than maybe it would seem when you think, oh, well, you can do anything. In any case, this is a bit of a half-baked thought. I had hopes to do some more thinking about this, but it's at least like a thought prompt and something to get you thinking about storytelling in games. And obviously, I'm not like the expert on story in games. I've made literally no games that have a story. So every game I've made is like focused pretty much purely on the mechanics. And there is story stuff in Taiji, but it's very much divorced from the type of thing that David Cage is doing. So, one thing I might suggest looking into is some of the stuff that Thomas Grip of Frictional Games, the developers of Amnesia and Soma, he's written a lot of stuff about storytelling in games, and I think some of his thoughts are pretty interesting in terms of talking about, what games are good at doing versus what they're not so good at doing. And story has different elements like your plot and your characters and your setting and your theme, and just games are good at certain aspects of those and not others. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on endlessly about this when I don't have like a clear, strong, decisive point to make about it, but I thought it would be an interesting thought prompt to bring up, and if you have some thoughts about it, then feel free to comment below. I think that pretty much does it for this week. I'm feeling like I've left out something significant, but we'll find that out in editing. In any case, I'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have a written devlog by then, because I elapsed the entire month of June without writing one. And I said I was going to write something up about the technical aspects of the mouse movement. In any case, I hope I'll see you next week. Hope to see you all next week. Until then, like the video if you liked it. Comment below. Again, let's discuss this whole topic of story in games. Are there stories in games that you particularly like? Are the ones that you like very interactive or not very interactive? Just let's talk about it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. That way you can see when these videos go up. Wishlist Taiji on Steam. There's a link in the description for that. And I think that's it. Oh, follow the game on Twitter at Taiji Game. And if you want to hear my thoughts, follow me on Twitter at MVanDiemeter. I'll see you all around next week. Have a good one, everybody.